Right, in the red zone, priority number one is always yourself. Okay, we spend so much time thinking about how to fix and change our child's behaviour that we sometimes forget about our own emotion regulation and what we bring to the scenario, and that really is key, as I think we conveyed last week. So, you know, a nice little trick that I use to help myself to become regulated when my child is in the red zone is the 3 L's. Well, first of all, I breathe. Okay, so breathe in through your nose and try and do quite an extended one if you can. And the reason, there's actually a scientific reason behind nasal breathing, which is that when you breathe in through your nose, it forces the air right down to the bottom of your lungs where the receptors are to activate your parasympathetic or calm down system. You notice the emotion, you label it. Okay, right, I'm quite stressed here. You locate it, so you might even put your hand on your chest or on your head or wherever you feel will give you that feedback that you need to kind of regulate yourself. And then you let it be is the third L. So just you acknowledge the emotion. This is hard. I am stressed, but try to accept it for what it is rather than judging it or fighting it. You just need to try to understand, I suppose, that this is a difficult day for yourself and just accept the emotion as it is. Something that I often say to myself is the "of course I am" because statement. So of course I am stressed because I've been up late, my baby's woken during the night, I have like 10 million things to do today. So just again, it's about becoming more curious as to why you're dysregulated yourself rather than judging yourself for it. So we're in the red zone with our child. The priority in this situation is always your child's safety. So it's about if they have any harmful objects, obviously we need to remove those from them first. You may need to remove a sibling or a younger child from the room. And it may, even if your child does not like kind of to be physically touched when they're in the red zone, again, if they have a harmful implement, we will need to remove that, which can require that physical touch of taking the object from them. But safety is always first. Sometimes, you know, you can get the timing of that more appropriate than other times as well. And you can try to be as gentle but as firm as possible with that approach if you do need to remove something from your child, and try to explain in a calm way. So, okay, I need to keep you safe, so I'm taking this from you. And try to say nothing else. Then you might try to place your hands over their hand, your hands on their back or their shoulder. So again, you're using that tactile approach to de-escalate the situation. Some kids respond very well to that. Other children, they might be quite aversive to that, so you might not want to use that approach. Again, this will be about a trial and error with your child. Each child has, you know, an individual nervous system, and that it will respond differently to different strategies. So it is about kind of trial and error. But usually in this red zone, non-verbal, keep it non-verbal is key, really, as much as possible. So just back to the tactile approach, so placing your hands over their hands, on their back or on their shoulders. You might maybe even hold their hands. And again, last week we mentioned the tapping, so you might take their hands and tap their hands on their knees like that, just back and forth. That regulates the midbrain, that it regulates the brainstem or that limbic system that has taken over. You might also want to consider giving your child their favourite comfort toy or object to hold, or a weighted toy that they can maybe put on their shoulders, especially if your child loves deep pressure. You might even give them a cushion to hold or to squeeze. You might, in this zone, need to create space for your child. So obviously a highly stimulating environment with lots of noise is not ideal if you want to help your child come out of the red zone. So you're always thinking of low arousal. So where can I go to find a quiet, maybe darker type space where the child can feel more regulated in themselves. So you might even create a space like this at home. You might show your child where this space is when they're in the green zone, so they practice knowing where this space is. It's really important to do these kind of teaching tasks outside of the red zone, because when they're in that red zone, they can't access logic or teaching. So create a little calm space at home, show them where it is, remind them every day, oh, this is your little safe space. And words can be important there, actually. So sometimes I know if I use the calm down tent with my children, it kind of backfires on me because I am calm, you know, so maybe calling it your special place or your safe space might be more appropriate, and they might be more amenable to going there when they are escalated. You need to aim basically in the red zone to adapt the environment really as well, to make it as low arousal as possible. Another way of doing this is bringing your child outside. So if the meltdown happens in the kitchen or, you know, near the front door or whatever, it can be very calming to actually bring them out into the air. Again, being outside, it activates the parasympathetic or calm down system. Another nice one is walking on grass, barefoot on the grass can actually really help. And if it's a windy day, apparently that wind, it's similar to deep pressure in that it gives them nice kind of calming feedback. So they're all ideas for you to use in the red zone. Then we move into the orange zone. And I guess what to remember here is that your child is more accessible to words and to understanding and to logic in this zone. So they haven't fully entered that lizard brain just yet, but they're close to it. So you need to be, again, careful about not overloading them with words and explanations and directions. So as it says there, they're more receptive to language and to direction or redirection than they are in the red zone. So some nice strategies when we're in the orange zone is it can be quite effective when you label the feeling for them and validate what's going on for them. So you might say something like, you know, I know it is really hard when you have to leave the playground, and I can see you feel really mad at me. I get it. So again, you're just kind of labeling what you're seeing. So you're not judging, you're not dismissing, you're not denying what's going on. You're acknowledging it, naming it, and that helps the child to feel heard and empathized with. Then you might be able to move more into distraction type techniques with something like, you know, Mammy gets really cross when she has to finish some activities too. I hate when I have to leave the TV when my favorite soap is on. Or you could even say something like, oh, you know, Mammy gets really cross when she has to finish her favorite activities. Can you guess what they are? So you're kind of moving them on from the stuckness of not wanting to leave the playground. So if your child has difficulties with receptive language, you might just need to use maybe some non-verbal prompts or direct them to some sensory items or encourage them to engage in movement. So you're using maybe more of the stuff that was relevant in the red zone. I would always, in the orange zone though, encourage your child to move in whatever way we can. Because again, this helps to regulate that midbrain or that limbic system, which is about to take off. Also in this orange zone, your child is more amenable to making choices. So you can explain to them, you know, yes, it is really hard that we have to leave the playground, but you know what, you have a choice. We can go to the car and sit in the car nicely and calmly and listen to your favorite song or whatever, or you can choose to get really cross with me. I wonder which choice you're going to make. So you're teaching them that skill of pausing and actually choosing a response, rather than, you know, them always having to resort to the negative behaviours or the more difficult behaviours. So I mentioned this earlier. This can be used as a green zone strategy, but it can also be used in the orange zone as well. So instead of dismissing or denying our child's feelings, this slide here illustrates the idea of naming the feeling and validating it, as I said earlier, rather than just telling them to stop. It's a nice skill to have. So you can see the mum here, the child has fallen and hurt her knee, and the mum is all going straight into dismiss, deny. She just doesn't want to deal with it. So don't cry, it's okay. Don't be sad, you're fine. Just be more careful. She's also apportioning blame onto the child, which isn't going to help. When you start to change this response yourself, you will notice that sometimes your response to the child's red zone behaviour, it says actually far more about you and your beliefs or responses to that behaviour. So we often go into dismiss and deny mode because maybe we don't want to have to deal with the behaviour. We're in a rush, we're trying to get to work, someone is looking at me, I'm going to be judged for being a terrible parent. My child shouldn't be behaving this way at this age. So we have all these rules, ideas and beliefs about how things should be, when really a child, as we mentioned last week, their prefrontal cortex, that thinking brain, is still not developed. It's not fully developed until they're in their mid-20s. So yes, having meltdowns and tantrums and getting quite upset, it is appropriate for their age, within reason, of course, not you know, all day, every day isn't typical, but some meltdowns and tantrums are typical for the age and stage of development that they're at. We just need to be mindful of that, really, in how we respond to their behaviours. Instead of dismissing and denying, as we can often do, we move on to trying to name it and to tame it instead. So here we see the mum, she has a different approach. So rather than dismissing, denying, avoiding or apportioning blame onto the child, the mum here, she kind of just surrenders really to the upset. You know, she steers into the feeling, names it, she acknowledges it, and she kind of co-regulates, as we say, with the child. So she's there naming the emotion with the child. So we can see that she changes her responses significantly here compared to the first slide. So when the child says, I fell and hurt my knee, yeah, that can hurt. I saw you running and you tripped, you scraped your knee. Then what happened? Oh, mommy came. Yeah, that's right. I held you and I rocked you. Did you feel better? Yes. So do you want to show me then what happened? And the child then is far more engaged. She feels heard. She feels validated. And she feels like the mum wants to kind of problem solve with her. And in letting the child explain here what has happened, or by encouraging her to show her, the mum, how she fell, you're giving her the chance to see for herself maybe how she might have fallen and maybe what you might avoid next time. So you're moving into kind of problem solving mode as well. So it's a much more helpful way to respond. In a similar vein then, you know, as parents, we often tend to command and demand. And again, that's often, you know, as a result of maybe how we were parented. As I mentioned last week, our generation, we might have been more used to being controlled or kind of fear-based parenting. So we dare not misbehave or fear that we'll get in trouble. Yes, it did stop behavior, but we never really learned how to behave in a different way. And it also kind of lent itself to even more kind of nervous system dysregulation at times. So here we see another example. So, Mom, you never leave me a note in the middle of the night and I hate homework. And the mum says, what are you doing out of bed? So go back to your room and I do not want to see you again until morning. So we see this little fella getting out of bed, which for parents can be very triggering, as this is their time to themselves, okay? These are the times, though, when you need to be very aware of your own regulation state. So it's late at night, everyone's tired, you finally get to sit down and all you wanted was some time to yourself before you go to bed. So it can be so easy at those times just to flip into command and demand mode and get angry, like this mom is here. But here we see that she adopts a different approach. So rather than the command and demand, she aims to connect with the child, hear what he's saying, validate it, and then redirect to something else. So again, it's about acknowledging and steering into that feeling. You just let your initial kind of madness just be, and you go with what your child is saying and how they're feeling. So you connect with your child at an emotional level, but acknowledging their emotions once that connection is made. So it's far more likely that they're going to listen to what you're saying once you have made that connection with your child. So we see the mum's response there change. So, you know, I get frustrated about things like that too. So she's empathizing, so the child feels understood. So do you want me to leave you a note tonight? Okay, so she's working with what she can work with. That is something that she could do to solve the problem rather than just dismiss it. And I've got some ideas about homework, but it's late now. So let's talk more tomorrow. So she's still laying a boundary, but in a very different way to how she did in the first picture. And it's, you can almost feel that yourself, like that would be far more effective if that was you, if you were that little boy in the picture. And just to, I suppose, to put it on a relatable level, just to imagine if you were in a job that's where it's completely understaffed and you're doing way more than your fair share. And so you kind of announce to your boss in a meeting that you're quite tired and fed up. And let's say they respond by saying, come on now, it's not that bad. You know, we had that staff wellness day the other day. Let's keep the spirits up. Do you know, why don't you go for a walk at break time and try and cool off a bit, okay? You can imagine how you might respond to that. You might feel quite dismissed, almost maybe undermined. Your efforts haven't been noticed. So a more helpful response that your boss could make would be, yeah, you know, I know you're really tired. I can see that. And you're doing way more than you should be doing. And I really appreciate that. You know, I don't actually have an immediate solution. but I would love you to help me to try to find one. Will you help me with that? Okay, so they're two hugely different approaches, and they can have such different outcomes on your emotional response to the situation. So again, that's just to kind of put this in a real life adult type scenario for you to relate to. That kind of brings us to the end of strategies for the red zone and for the orange zone.